I'm going to take a shot at this. This is a presentation I'm going to do. I may put this one up on YouTube, but this may just be a practice run. Let's play from the start. What I'm going to do in this one is ask the question, what are the odds of having 138,000 votes for the same candidate in a row? This is what happened in Michigan. So let's go on, and here's the outline of what I'm going to do. I'm going to talk briefly about what I'm not doing, which is I am not trying to say those 138,000 votes would have swung the election one way or the other. I haven't looked into that. I'll let other people look into that, because this is kind of just like, this is a real, specific question that I can do, or I can take a stab at. So I'm throwing this up there so other YouTubers can look at my math and see if I've made a mistake. I've made mistakes before with math. I mean, on one of my videos, I put up, I called a number. I had it written down correctly, but I rounded off a number and I called it a trillion when it was really in the billions. But anyway, I'm just looking at that situation in Michigan where 138,000 votes turned up all at the same time for Biden, which is, I'm using his code as blue. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go straight to the results. And if you want to look at that and not go through these other things, the calculations, I'll show you my methodology in the calculations. Okay, so, and that is not completely on the screen for some reason. What do I do about that? I'll go up. Yeah, that'll work. So I just need to do that. Hopefully I don't have to do that on any other ones. Play from current slide. Okay, so the result of my calculation is it's basically, it's impossible for that to happen. But I come up with a calculation just so I can prove it, I guess. The odds are less than. The reason I underline less than will become apparent later. The odds are less than this huge whopping number, that is actually a 15 with 209 zeros after it. So the odds are less than any lottery game that you would ever play, that 138 votes for blue were cast one after another in sequence without a single red vote being cast in the midst of them. So that kind of spells out, somebody was attempting fraud, but they weren't doing it in a very smart way, I suppose, because that would just never happen. Even in a district where, as I'll show, even in a district where most of the voters might even be blue voters, it really doesn't matter. I use that assumption, and I'll show you that later. And then, these are the results. Just because that number is so, so ridiculous that I don't have a feel for it. I looked up the odds to win Mega Millions, and that's 1 in 302,600,000. And just to put it in this same notation, which is what Excel spits this number out in, apparently Excel will go up to e to the 999, and that's as far as it'll go. It'll only go through digits, which makes sense. no reason to do any calculations with numbers that large or small, if you say 1 divided by that. Well, anyway, so I go 3.026 e to the 8 is the same thing as that. You just move the decimal point 8 places over there. And a Powerball is 292. The odds are 1 in 292 million. And then the odds, I just said, the odds of, if you went out and bought tickets for both the Powerball and the Mega Millions, the odds of you winning both of them, with those 2 tickets, would be this number multiplied by that number, which is 1 in, apparently that's 88 quadrillion, with 16 zeros after it. That's a quadrillion. And I'm just not used to big numbers like that. I was introduced to trillion, towards the end of the Obama presidency. Actually, I didn't really have a good feel for what it was. And so another way of getting a feel for it was, let's see, I'll just read this, and that is still way more than the odds of having 138,000 votes for the same candidate by a 17 with 192 zeros after it. So the odds are just so astronomically small as to be effectively zero. Now, I'm going to show you my assumptions. The odds are so small that 138,000 votes cast in a row can't be calculated by Excel on an Excel spreadsheet or a calculator. It just returns an error. So I went with, I tried to do 13,800 votes. And that's the number that the New York Times said, hold on, according to an article I read, in one article it said, that they first reported 138,000, then they said, you know what, we made a mistake. It was only 13,800 votes. And probably what they were trying to do is say that, this number wasn't enough to change the election, and maybe this number was. But that's not what I'm trying to prove. I'm trying to, if I go back to the very beginning, what are the odds? I'm just zoning in on that specific task. What are the odds? I'm not trying to prove that somebody won the election or lost the election, and I think that's what they were, covering for, if that's the right word for it. Well, even 13,800, Excel won't calculate a number that small. So I couldn't use the New York Times number, so I just took off another zero and said, what are the odds of 1380 votes being cast in order? And, whatever those odds are, the odds for 138,000 are worse, logically. Okay, so, and then I figured somebody would say, well, you know what? What if the votes came from a precinct that was mostly blue rather than red? Those 130, I think Detroit. I looked up Detroit, and Detroit was about 70% Democrat and 30% Republican. So I just kept using easier and easier numbers. I went from 138 to 13,800 to 1,380, and I went from 50-50 to 70-30, and still come up with a ridiculously small number. So here's the calculations, and so I go to the spreadsheet for that. And This is probably where I need some help or some critique. Um, so what I did was the first thing I did was Google and see if there was some kind of formula that would fit this situation exactly. And I didn't find that, so I just had to go ahead and think through it. And so again, this is well. Let me describe this case right here. So if we had 10 marbles, 5 blue and 5 red in a bag, and you just reached blindfolded into the bag and pulled out a marble, one marble, your odds would be really 1 in 2 or 5 in 10 that marble would be a blue marble. It'd be 50-50, or your odds would be 1 in 2. Now, after you take away that blue marble, then it's not 50-50 anymore. It's going to be 50-50 and times 1, 2, 3, 4 out of a total of 9, because you've removed that one. So, 5 and 4 is 9. So you can kind of see the pattern, and the pattern continues on right there. So you take another one away, and I won't go through this whole thing, obviously, but take another one away, then your odds are, of getting 3 in a row. That's what we're saying here. Your odds on that one pull are 3 out of 8, but getting 3 in a row, your odds would be 5/10 times 4/9 times 3/8. So you can see the pattern, and it goes all the way down to here until they're all gone. And the odds of getting 5 marbles in a row, 5 blues in a row out of a total of 10, if they're all in the bag and there's a 50-50 mix, or 1, it's that number or the inverse of that number is all I did is put that inverse there to just to show it in a different way. Your odds are 1 in 252 for 5 marbles, and you can see where this is going. When you get up into the thousands, it's going to be ridiculously. It just keeps getting, the odds just keep getting smaller of getting that extra marble. And you can read some of this right here. If you had 252 attempts at this, that is another way of saying it, you would have, if you did this 252 times, you would likely get one chance out of 252, you'd get 5 blues in a row. Okay, so I just showed that because that's part of the math over here. Okay, now this situation is, I don't believe, to the best of my ability, I believe this is the situation where we're voting. So you notice that number right there is much smaller than this number. But the reason I'm going to do this number, I'm going to do this over here for the calculation, is because it's just easier. And so if I took, reached in the bag, pulled out a blue marble, and then put that marble back each time, then my odds of picking 5 marbles would be 1/2 times 1/2 times 1/2 times 1/2 times 1/2, which is the same thing as 0.5. Well, I put it down here. Same thing as 0.5 raised to the 5th power. So you can see how easy that calculation is. And you notice that this number is much less than this number. So we're being conservative. Okay, so let's go over and just extrapolate out of that the situation that we have in Michigan, which is 138,000. Okay, so I tried 138,000, get an error, Excel can't handle that number. So we know that number is basically zero. I mean, it's ridiculously small. Here, the number is, Excel can't handle it, so we don't know what the number is. The only time we can learn the number is if we assume there's 1,380. So I'll describe this math here in detail. So not only did I change this from 50-50, I changed it to Detroit situation, which said, hey, there's, just for the person that would say, hey, Detroit's not 50-50, and that's where these votes came from, because I don't know where they came from. Detroit is actually 70-30 approximately. I did look that up. So that's where the 0.7 comes in. So that makes the number bigger because it's a bigger number. And you raise that to the power of 1380. And then this number right here, this 5,435,176, is the number that I found that was the total number of votes in Michigan, 5,435,000. Well, I have to multiply that number. I have to multiply by that number and divide by the 13. Well, we know it's not really 1380, it's 138,000. And that makes this number a little bigger, and therefore this number a little smaller, but it's still a ridiculously small number. So the inverse of that is that number. And I just rounded off and I said, here's what we can say. The odds are at the most 1.5 e to the 210 that 1,380 votes were cast for blue, one after another in sequence, with not a single red vote cast in between. And of course, that's even more true for 13,800 votes, and even more true for 138,000 votes. And I said, if you're not used to big numbers, that's a 15 followed by 209 zeros. There's one decimal point, and then that leaves 209. It's a 1.5 followed by 210 zeros, or a 15 followed by 209 zeros. So in other words, the conclusion is that didn't happen naturally. Okay, so now I'm not saying there was fraud. Maybe there's an explanation for it. But let's go back to the presentation, play, and then we'll play from current slide, and I'll go to the conclusion. So what I'm suggesting is that in the search for fraud, focus the search mainly for the anomaly of, I don't know, say 1,000 or even 500 votes, whatever is so unlikely that it just couldn't have happened by calculation. And I've already done 1,380, so certainly 1,500 would be ridiculously small odds that you would have 500 votes in a row. And apparently, there was 138,000 votes for a single candidate. So that's kind of obvious that needs explanation. So you then ask, how is that possible? And is there an explanation for it? So somebody's got some explaining to do as to why. Maybe there's an explanation for it, but I don't know what it would be. Why would you separate all of the Trump votes from the Biden votes? Maybe there's a reason. Maybe it's easier to enter them in that way. I don't know, but there's just no way that naturally you would have that many in a row, obviously. So that's where I would suggest the focus be. Now, this is not my thing to do, but I can easily do the calc, but I don't have enough information, you know. This is kind of looking at it. In a way, I don't really have that much of a dog in the hunt. I'll just be honest and disclose that I did vote for Trump. But, you know, other than that, I just want to get at the truth, and there's something fishy here. So, again, conclusion is somebody's got some explaining to do. So that's it. And, you know, if there's a problem with the math, you know, let me know. But I think the math is conservative. I think this is the right way to do it. I just don't want to get that complicated, you know, with a large number of votes. It'd take forever. So I just did a simple calc, and the simple calc underestimates the problem. Okay, so that's about it. Leave me some comments if you have any questions. Hopefully I won't get kicked off YouTube for this, but I don't think I will. All right, thank you for watching.